Nickelodeon, if you want to know about it, it's a kid-owned environment.
What's up, fellas? How's it going?
Hey, how you doing, Jim? It's great to meet you.
Oh yeah, you too, guys. Where are you guys at?
So I am in Austin, Texas. Scott is in Houston, Texas. What about you?
Oh, that's close enough. I'm in Chicago.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Nice.
That's
There
very
we
cool.
go. We're doing this cross country. I love it. Let's go. Let's go. Let's start this off. Man, I had tons of questions for you guys. I couldn't wait to talk to you about this. First of all, were you guys fans of Nickelodeon growing up? I mean, what kind of to dive in this deep into it? You guys had to have some sort of connection to it. So I'm going to start with you, Scott. What was your connection to make this happen?
Oh yeah, we were huge fans. Like everybody, we were huge Nickelodeon fans growing up. And fun fact is that Adam and I have been friends since the early 90s. So we grew up together. So this was personal for us because we both watched these shows both separately and we watched these shows together. So we were both huge Nickelodeon fans, and it was a huge part of our childhood. And more importantly, it was a huge part of our friendship.
Adam, what shows did you guys watch together? What was the initial? Do you remember the first show that bonded you guys together? And
yeah, for sure, it was Are You Afraid of the Dark? Scott and I both come from broken homes, or a house of divorce, not necessarily broken, but and we started talking about Nickelodeon around the time that the premiere of Are You Afraid of the Dark happened. Nickelodeon did a Halloween special. And they showed the Tale of the Twisted Claw. They showed Salute Your Shorts, the tale of Zeke the Plumber, and we immediately were talking about it. And we were like, "Oh man, this is amazing!" Blah blah blah, because we had never seen anything like it. And when I moved away, my family moved away. One of the ways that we stayed friends is that we would call each other, and every Saturday night we would watch Snick. And we would just talk about the shows as they were happening, and so it definitely meant a lot to us personally. And we've heard a lot of stories of other fans of Nickelodeon that went through the same things. And so it was really cool. And this is before the era of social media. So when you moved away, it didn't matter what distance you moved away from, like you basically were being sent off to another galaxy. And it kept us together, kept our friendship together, and ultimately ended up being a fun story to tell as friends and as creative colleagues.
So how many years later? I mean, how long does this documentary been in the making for you guys? And how did you initially come up with the idea? Like, hey, let's dig deep and go to the groundswell of this network. And really, I mean, this is a heck of a timeline, because this documentary really takes you through from the beginnings to really all along the way. There's not many missteps at all. When was this idea approached, and how do you even come up with this? Like, hey, let's go and take this monumental task and put it together. Either of you can jump in.
Yeah. So the question is basically, where did the idea come from, or how do we decide to do this? How do we jump in?
Both, yeah.
I mean, Adam and I had written some scripts together in the past. We were kind of like a screenwriting duo before this, and we really loved the idea of making a film from start to finish, not selling something off to somebody else to get made. We wanted something that we could, kind of keep some creative control. And we figured a documentary would be one of the most accessible ways of doing that. So we started thinking, what would be cool? What would be a good idea for a doc? What's a subject that hasn't been done before? And the idea of Nickelodeon came up, and we did some research and realized, I can't believe it, nobody's done a Nickelodeon doc. It felt like one of those ideas that should have already been done.
True.
And so that was the first step. And then we said, okay, that's great. That's something that people are passionate about. But is there a story there? And then once we started doing some digging and we found out about Geraldine Laybourne and Vanessa Coffey and Anne Sweeney, that's when we realized there absolutely was a story there. There was a really great story. So nostalgia might get people interested in them, but then this story of Geraldine and her team is what would keep people there and give people a good story and give people a good ride. And it also gave us a good starting and ending point. because if you're making a documentary about Nickelodeon, how do you focus that? How do you kind of give it a through line? How do you give it a definitive starting and ending point? So the movie, when it kind of became more about her career and her tenure, that's when it really got life and it really became real at that point.
I think it was very critical for us, and we talked about this a lot, that this film was not just empty calories. And like Scott said, the faces that you see that you grew up idolizing and love, like Larissa Olenek and Kenan Thompson, Kel Mitchell. I mean, you could go down the list, right? Like that's what, I think immediately makes people want to watch. But hopefully the idea is that you walk away. We always talk about the idea of, that you loved Nickelodeon. Now we're going to tell you why you loved it.
Mm-hmm. When you guys start putting this together, I mean, for you guys to get all the people that were literally involved with this whole network, I mean, how do you even start reaching out and pitching this idea to bring, because without them really, you can't tell the story, because this is coming from them personally, their experiences, their accounts of everything. I mean, you guys literally got everyone you could have imagined and hoped for. How did that whole pitch process come around, and getting them to actually, take you guys seriously too, in a lot of ways, like, hey, we're going to do an honest thing here, and something that they can actually really spill kind of their guts to, and their hard work over the years?
It got easier as we were going. At the beginning, when all we had was this kind of crowdfund video of me and Adam, and we were sending that out and saying, hey, this is a documentary that we want to do. And we were first-time filmmakers. It was difficult. But even then, when it was at its most difficult, people were still really excited to do it. That made our job that much easier. The fact that people had these fond memories of Nickelodeon and agreed that this was a story that needed to be told. We just had to kind of convince people that we were the guys to do that. So in the beginning, we were just reaching out to people however we could. If we could find their Facebook or their Instagram, we were sliding into the DMs. If we could go through their publicist or manager, we were just hitting it from all sides. And once we got a few people to say yes and we interviewed them, after we got that first batch, it got a lot easier, because people would call their friends for us and kind of vouch for us and set up interviews for us. So yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, we made a list of, these are all the people that we would want if all of our dreams came true. And this is the bare minimum of how many people we could do and still make a fun documentary. And at the end, our list was even bigger than our dream list. We got even more people than we ever could have thought of. Because there were some people that in the beginning we were like, we probably won't be able to get this person, but I think that'll be okay. And in the end, we got so many people. So it was a good problem to have.
No question.
And it says a lot about the interviewees, that they were willing to trust us, because this is their lives. I mean, their life story that, that they're taking, that they are entrusting us with and handing over. And, that it's funny because we heard stories about, everybody has had moments where somebody reached out where they were like, we're going to do this, we're really interested or whatever. And they were just like a super fan, who just whatever, had other intentions or whatever it may be. Right. And then there inevitably, as there always are, there are films that people have the best of intentions of getting done, and they never get finished, right? Making a film or making any type of story is very difficult to get from, pre-production all the way through post. And so it was a huge challenge. And, whenever we're creating the list from the very beginning, you had no idea who you were going to get. And there were people that understandably were positive and enthusiastic, but also hesitant for a while, right? But eventually we showed that we could be the caretakers of this story. And that was whenever even more people came on, right? And it helped out a lot that they would tell each other, because the Nickelodeon family is very tight-knit. And so once somebody, like, for example, like Elisa Reyes, who's one of our producers, who was an amazing actress and still is an amazing actress and is on all that now, right? Like, she was on all that, and we talked to her, and she was like, hey, so I I'm friends with this person, this person, this person. I could probably connect you to them. And that just goes so much further than anything,
yeah.
that two guys could, are just like, hey, it's us. We promise that we, we're going to do a good job, versus like Elisa, who has said like, hey, listen, I've worked with these people. I can vouch for them. And then at that point, there's the barrier comes down a little bit. But so it was a very huge undertaking, but it was such a fun undertaking as well.
You guys being fans and being bonded by this network and these shows, when you dive this deep and you get the history of it and you speak to all these people involved, how did you, it's like you go behind the fourth wall in a sense. Did it change your perception of Nickelodeon and the shows after doing this documentary? Like, how do you feel about it now that you kind of know the secrets and, discovered Oz in a way, in that way? Was there more appreciation gained for him? Were there aha moments? What are some things you kind of took away from that or learned or stand out after you went from fans to kind of being filmmakers on this?
I know for me, I gained even more appreciation. Like you said, like we talked about before, we were already fans, so it's not like we were skeptical. But talking to these people, there's so many things that you take for granted because you're watching it as a little kid, and these people are so good at what they're doing. It just felt like it was coming naturally, and specifically, just as an example, talking to DJ McHale, the creator of Are You Afraid of the Dark? That show is everybody's favorite show. I mean, so many people's favorite, not everybody, but it's a lot of people's favorite show. It's a great show. And as a kid, you're not thinking of the fact that that's an anthology show. So they're having to create totally new characters every single episode. They can't rely on the same characters every time. Yeah, you had the Midnight Society at the beginning and end, but the majority of it was totally new characters, totally new locations, and totally new actors. So they had to come up with fresh ideas and recast that over and over and over again. And I think you can see how good they were at casting actors by how many people from Are You Afraid of the Dark went on to be huge stars. Ryan Gosling was on an early episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Nev Campbell, Elisha Cuthbert, all these people, like you can tell clearly they knew how to get talented kids. So for me, I learned a lot of things that I never would have thought of. I was like, oh my God, I knew I liked that, but I didn't know why until, you told me that. And Adam and I researched so much, but you can only do so much research. There's nothing like hearing it straight from the source. So there was so much that we still weren't prepared for until we got in the presence of these people and they let us in on stuff.
Yeah, I fell in love with all of these creative programmers, the performers, and the stories even more so, because it's interesting because, we grew up looking up to all of these performers, and now we grow up looking up to the storytellers, right? And the people that do the stuff on the back end. And so you can both sympathize and empathize with what they were going through when you hear the stories that even didn't make the cut, right? About how Are You Afraid of the Dark had to explain and justify what they were doing, to networks. And, we have those types of pains where we have to, where you have to like explain what's going on and do your pitch. And so just knowing how much work went into it for everybody involved. And then, the people that I always found myself gravitating towards, because we love pop culture, right? Not just Nickelodeon, but the people that I love cheering for are the people that are just really kind. And everybody was kind on this. And you just don't get that very often, right? Like there were, Scott and I always say there were no divas. There was nobody that had said that they had a bad experience. And you just find yourself wanting to support them even more. And it's so cool, right? You talked about like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like the story behind the Wizard of Oz is that like the wizard has no idea what he's doing. And, he's kind of a bumbling fool, which makes you kind of sympathize for him to a degree, but he's kind of a jerk realistically for the most part, right? This is like the Wizard of Oz, only finding out that the Oz is like the kindest person that you would ever meet in your life. and they're also going to show you how they're working all the levers and all the mechanisms, you know. So there's no smoke and mirrors, right?
We kept thinking eventually there's going to be somebody that had a bad experience, you know, because you always hear about the jaded child actor, you know, that's you hear about that all the time. We kept thinking eventually we'll run into that, and we were blown away by the fact that we never did, you know. And we interviewed, I mean, you could see how many we had, you know. The fact that none of them did, it just goes to show what an amazing non-toxic environment that was.
Did you guys ever think about what kind of the world and even the industry in so many ways be if Nickelodeon never happened? Like, where would that kind of take? Because evolved television in so many ways. I mean, it's a game changer. It's a mark in not only pop culture but television history. What if this network never came about? Did you guys ever have these conversations, and maybe with some of these creators too? I'm just going to start out with you, Scott. What would you think would happen if Nickelodeon never started up?
Yeah, we did talk about that. And I think that, I mean, one specific way is the world of animation. I think they completely changed animation. You know, for a long time in the 70s and 80s, animation was pretty stale. There wasn't anything really artistic or creator driven going on. There wasn't much art to the animation. It was just kind of like commercials for action figures, and they all kind of looked the same. And you know, whereas the early days of Looney Tunes, that's an art form. You know, the stretching, the pulling, and the comedy. There was so much effort and creativity put into that I think was gone for a long time. And I think with their Nicktoons, they brought that back. And I hope that's one thing that people see in the doc, because you take it for granted, you know, with a network like Cartoon Network that's got cartoons all day,
right,
every day, versus back in the day, cartoons were only on Saturday mornings. The Cartoon Network doesn't seem strange now, but if you had told us back in the 80s, hey, one day there's going to be a channel that plays cartoons all day, you would be like, what? That's insane. And they opened the door for that. And then I really believe shows like Steven Universe, and then also adult shows like Rick and Morty, they owe so much to the Nicktoons, to getting it more about the art, the writing, creating an original, unique look, being driven by the creator, being creator driven. I think that the world of animation would still be like that, or maybe somebody else would have changed it. Who knows? But it wouldn't be where we are today if we hadn't had Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, Adam, what's your kind of take on that?
I think we would have had way, and there's a place for it to a degree, but we would have had more Mickey Mouse clubs. There would have been a monopoly, realistically, on children's programming. And when you go back and you look at the children's programming that was happening before Nickelodeon broke through the wall, it was reverse engineered to sell something, right? Transformers, My Little Pony, He-Man, and My Little Pony's better now, right? But it was all just to sell a toy. And when you go back and you watch like the original Transformers, as much as I love it and I'm fond of it, it's really bad. And it's just obvious that it was all about introducing just new action figures to sell, right? And it worked. It worked.
Totally. That's what made these shows, literally.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember, you know, I was talking the other day to a friend, and I was just like, I remember how excited I was to see the Dinobots, but all that they did was just show up and just kind of smash stuff a little bit. And then they were just like, me, Grimlock. And that was it. And it's like, wow, like we could have, like a child could have made that writing. You know what I mean? Like it's basically what you do when you play with action figures, right? Is you're like, oh no, Batman. And it's like, yeah, you're never going to get me, right? And it's like, that's it, you know? They took it to another level, and we are seeing that replicated in other genres, like, you know, like Jason Blum and Blumhouse, to their credit, they're entrusting filmmakers and storytellers to get to do that. And you don't see that very often in the entertainment industry at all. And so I think that what you would have seen is a lot more packaging, less creative storytelling. And like Scott said, it would have probably been a continuation, and it would have been stale. And there would have been some people that would have broken through, like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and people like that, but it wouldn't have been nearly as good. We owe so much to Nickelodeon and to Geraldine Laybourne and all of the visionaries that were part of that network.
Kind of the other end of the spectrum. I mean, now going into the future, where we're in such a different age with social media and internet, and it's interesting to see how Nickelodeon has evolved to maintaining the old programming too, and a lot what made it popular, and still into this new modern age, but also introducing new styles and new kind of things for a new generation. Where do you see this network going into the future now, with seemingly so much is available for kids? I mean, kids now, you guys know, we were like watching these shows, that was things we look forward to, but now kids at like age 5, 6, they're on their tablets, and looking at different stuff and different games. Where do you see the network and Nickelodeon going into the future, and how do you think they can hold up with this whole new era that we live in of this digital age? And I'm going to start with you, Scott.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brian Robbins is in charge over there, and he was hired by Geraldine Laybourne. He was one of the creators of all that. Mm-hmm. And talking to Geraldine Laybourne, she is over the moon at the direction he's wanting to go. And I think you're seeing it. I mean, they brought back Double Dare. They brought back Are You Afraid of the Dark? They're talking about other shows, some of the Nicktoons. I think Rugrats is coming back. So I think that's really cool, that they are kind of taking another look at these classic shows. And I think that, I mean, that's just based on what I know, what I think. But what I would love to see is, I remember back in the 90s, people always wanted to know who's the next Nirvana. Because Nirvana changed everything. That's and everyone's like, who's going to be the next Nirvana? And they were always looking at bands that sounded like Nirvana to be the next Nirvana, when that's actually, ironically, completely backwards, because to find the next Nirvana, you have to find a band that sounds totally different and new. So I think that you can't necessarily recreate the past by simply recreating it. Kids are different in what kids need. Nickelodeon spoke to kids in the 80s and 90s, and kids are different and they need different things. So I hope that they continue the trend of connecting with kids, but they will have to do it differently, because kids are different than they were back in the 80s and 90s. So you have to connect with them in a different way, kind of like in Spider-Man, in the old days, he was a reporter. Kids don't aspire to write for the Daily Bugle now, they had to kind of update him. So I hope that they do that. And I hope that they just, connect with kids in a real, authentic way. I think that would be awesome. And another thing is, Nickelodeon wasn't just about the shows. It was so much more than that. It became from the items that you had, like the GAC or the Floam, or going to Nickelodeon Studios, or the bumpers. That's one thing that people always talk about, those bumpers there. Right. I would love for them to become more than that. And and I certainly don't have the answer, because people watch Nickelodeon shows on Netflix now, or watch Nickelodeon shows on Amazon. So when you're not watching it on the network, how do you still establish yourself as not just the shows? You're something bigger than that. I would love for them to continue to do that. I think that would be awesome.
I would love to see them get more interactive. I think that you have the opportunity now with social media to, and Nickelodeon used to do the Nickelodeon You Pick with Stickly and items like that, right? So like even before social media existed, they were allowing you, and when they would do like Halloween, like Big Help, they would do haunted houses where you would call and you would get to choose which way you were going down to win prizes. I would love to see them encourage and empower children to come up with ideas, and to work directly with, in TikTok and YouTube, and find the next wave of generation, like the next generation of programmers. Because that's what made them so amazing, is that they asked children with focus groups, and they wanted to know what children wanted. And, we don't know exactly like what they're doing, right? Like Brian Robbins is a genius. Chris Viscardi is a genius who's over there. And there are so many wonderful people. That's what I would love to see, is that you can operate in real time now, and you can be extending stories beyond stories. So it's like, what would it look like to do virtual reality or augmented reality so that kids and adults could get to go be part of Double Dare as it's happening? I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I think that would be also very reflective, like Scott said, and also emblematic of the time period that we're in, because what we see now is that the audience can speak to what's working and what's not working, and it can change in real time, and you can make these informed decisions. And I would love to see that, to put it in the hands so that it's that it's very much not symbiotic, but it's like, a mutualistic relationship. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I think that's a great idea. I think it's very fitting for
I'd do it.
times.
Yeah.
No, hey, if they're listening right there, there you go. You guys
Right.
do it. Just let them know if that's direct contact there. But I mean, it seems like the network is in good hands too. And it's good to know that the generations from the original creators are happy where the future's going with the new kind of visionaries and the new people running. That's good that there's that kind of passing of the baton and the torch, in a sense that they're rooting for each other too. That's great, that there's no animosity, because sometimes when networks change direction or ownership or people at the top, things change completely, but the vision seems, and it's like, what's old is new. Scott, you kind of mentioned some of these old shows coming back now that originally started a network. That's kind of in now in our society. We're craving for a lot of these reboots and, old things that used to be cool in the 80s and 90s to be brought back. So I think that really works.
It is cool too. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
No, after you.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think it's cool too, because it gives the opportunity for, if they can connect with kids on these shows, and adults, like if you bring back a show and you're able to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark with your kid, like that's awesome. That helps
right there.
Yeah, you already got the parents. We watched these shows back in the day, and we'll watch them if they come on again. If you can make it somehow fun for this new generation too, and you can, we spoke with Kel Mitchell, and he was on a new show on Nickelodeon called Game Shakers.
Game Shakers, yeah.
And he said that's really cool whenever the mom knows him from one show and the kid knows him for another show. The mom's like, that's Cal Kimball. And the kid's like, no, that's not, and it's like, that's pretty cool, So, I mean, I think that's great. Yeah. If they can somehow, it gives the two generations the ability to watch a show at the same time and bond. Hey, that's amazing.
Totally. Well, guys, that was a cool trip down memory lane for myself. I mean, I grew up with a lot of these shows, Rugrats and Doug, and it's cool to see kind of the origins of the network too. And, that network really marked a change in pop culture and change in how kids grew up, just like Sesame Street did for the previous generations, and that's kind of cool to see what you guys did there with the timelines and just, having these people too behind, these shows kind of speak on them. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you guys did a wonderful job to fans of Nickelodeon and even the new ones now of this generation that maybe weren't aware of some of these other great shows that made it what it is.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much, Jim, for, having us on and for supporting it. That means just as much as the ability to get to make it. And so, to you and to the rest of the Nickelodeon family around the world, like we hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that we get to connect again and talk more, about pop culture and everything at large. So thanks a lot, Jim.
Absolutely. We'll love to have you guys on a podcast, just discuss things at large. There's so much more to talk about, get to break down, but that'd be awesome. So I certainly hope to connect with you guys again.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Thank you guys so much. Talk to you soon then.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The energy was such that we thought we were going to change the world.
We could fail and do a crummy show, but we couldn't not take a risk.
So there's all those crazy things that happen that, nobody knows about.